The morning sun barely broke through the thick smoke that covered the battlefield. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez crouched behind a damaged concrete wall, her heart pounding as bullets whistled overhead. The sound of explosions echoed in the distance, mixing with the desperate shouts of soldiers calling for help. Maria had been deployed to Afghanistan for 8 months now. At 26, she was one of the few female combat medics in her unit. Her dark eyes had seen too much death and suffering, but she never let fear stop her from doing what was right. Her fellow soldiers respected her not just because she was skilled at her job, but because she never hesitated to risk her own life to save others. The attack had started before dawn. Enemy forces had surrounded their small outpost, and the fighting had been brutal. Maria's unit was trying to hold their position while waiting for backup, but casualties were mounting quickly. She had already treated 6 wounded soldiers that morning, her medical supplies running dangerously low. Through the chaos, she heard a voice crying out in pain. It was coming from an area about 50 yards away, where the enemy fire was heaviest. Maria peeked around the wall and saw a figure lying motionless near an overturned military vehicle. The person wasn't moving much, but she could tell they were still alive by the way they occasionally lifted their head. "Rodriguez, stay down," shouted Sergeant Thompson, her commanding officer. "That area's too hot, we can't reach whoever's out there." But Maria couldn't ignore the cries for help. She had taken an oath to save lives, no matter the cost. She studied the terrain between her position and the wounded soldier. There were several large rocks and pieces of debris she could use for cover, but she would be exposed for at least 20 seconds during the final approach. The wounded soldier cried out again, and Maria made her decision. She grabbed her medical bag and checked her rifle one last time. Taking a deep breath, she sprinted from her cover toward the first piece of debris. Bullets immediately started flying in her direction, kicking up dirt and sparks as they hit the ground and rocks around her. She dove behind a large boulder, her lungs burning from the short but intense run. From this new position, she could see the wounded soldier more clearly. It was a young man, probably in his early 20s, wearing the uniform of her unit. Blood was soaking through his jacket, and she could see that his left leg was badly injured. Maria waited for a brief pause in the enemy gunfire, then made another dash toward a destroyed piece of military equipment. This time, a bullet came so close to her head that she felt the air move. Her hands were shaking now, but she forced herself to stay calm and focused. The final stretch to reach the wounded soldier was the most dangerous. There was no cover for the last 15 yards. Maria would have to rely on speed and luck to make it across the open ground without getting shot. She said a quick prayer, then burst from her hiding spot at full speed. Bullets seemed to come from every direction. She heard them buzzing past her like angry insects. One tore through the sleeve of her jacket, and another hit the ground right where her foot had been a split second earlier. Time seemed to slow down as she covered the remaining distance. Finally, she threw herself down next to the wounded soldier, immediately rolling both of them behind the overturned vehicle for protection. The young man's eyes were barely open, and his breathing was shallow and rapid. Maria quickly assessed his injuries while keeping her head down to avoid the ongoing gunfire. "What's your name, soldier?" she asked, opening her medical bag. "Corporal. David." "Martinez," he gasped weakly. "My leg. I can't feel my leg." Maria could see that David had taken shrapnel to his left thigh and lost a significant amount of blood. His pulse was weak but steady, and she knew she had to act fast to save his life. She quickly applied pressure to the wound while reaching for her medical supplies. "You're going to be okay, David," she said firmly, looking directly into his eyes. "I'm Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, and I'm going to get you out of here, but I need you to stay awake and keep talking to me." As she worked to stop the bleeding, David managed to speak between labored breaths. He told her he was from Texas, that he had a younger sister back home who was studying to become a teacher. He talked about his mother's cooking and how much he missed his family's Sunday dinners. Maria found herself drawn to his voice and his determination to keep fighting. Even though he was badly injured and in tremendous pain, David never complained or asked her to leave him behind. Instead, he kept asking if she was safe and whether she needed help with anything. The enemy fire was getting closer, and Maria knew they couldn't stay in their current position much longer. She had managed to stabilize David's leg injury, but he needed immediate evacuation to a proper medical facility. She got on her radio and called for backup, giving their exact coordinates. "This is Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. I have a wounded soldier who needs immediate evacuation. We're pinned down behind a destroyed vehicle about 50 yards southeast of the main compound." The response was not encouraging. "Rodriguez, we're taking heavy fire ourselves. It might be another hour before we can reach your position." David heard the radio conversation and grabbed Maria's arm weakly. "Don't stay here because of me," he whispered. "You should go back to safety." Maria looked at him with determination. "I'm not leaving you, David. We're both getting out of this together, or neither of us is." She knew that staying meant risking both their lives, but abandoning a wounded soldier was not an option for her. Maria checked her ammunition and prepared for a long wait, hoping that help would arrive before the enemy forces found their hiding spot. As explosions continued around them, she held David's hand and promised him that they would both see another sunrise. The sun climbed higher in the sky, but Maria and David remained trapped behind the overturned vehicle. Enemy gunfire continued sporadically, keeping them pinned down while backup seemed impossibly far away. Maria had used most of her medical supplies treating David's wounds, and she could see that despite her efforts, he was getting weaker. "Tell me about home," Maria said softly, trying to keep David conscious and distracted from the pain. She continued applying pressure to his leg wound while scanning the area for any signs of approaching help or enemy movement. David's voice was getting quieter, but he managed a small smile. "My family has a ranch outside San Antonio. Nothing fancy, just some cattle and horses. My dad taught me to ride when I was 5 years old." He paused to catch his breath. "What about you? Where are you from?" Maria found herself sharing details she rarely talked about with fellow soldiers. "Chicago. My parents immigrated from Mexico when they were young. My father worked construction, and my mother cleaned offices at night so she could take care of my little brother during the day." She checked David's pulse again, relieved to find it was still steady, though weak. As the hours passed, their conversation deepened. David told her about his dreams of becoming a veterinarian after his military service ended. He wanted to take care of animals on ranches like the one where he grew up. Maria shared her own plans to use her medical training to become a nurse practitioner in civilian life, maybe working in a community clinic where she could help families who couldn't afford expensive health care. "You know," David said during a brief lull in the distant gunfire, "I never imagined I'd be sharing my life story with someone I just met while hiding behind a blown-up truck in the middle of a war zone." Maria laughed, despite their dangerous situation. "Well, this certainly wasn't part of my training either. But I'm glad I got to know you, David Martinez from Texas." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching vehicles. Maria carefully raised her head to see if it was their backup or enemy forces. Her heart sank when she saw 3 enemy trucks heading in their direction. The soldiers in those vehicles would surely find their hiding spot within minutes. "David, we need to move," she whispered urgently.
"Can you put any weight on your good leg?"
He tried to sit up, gritting his teeth against the pain. "I think so, but I'll need help." Maria quickly repacked her medical supplies and slung David's arm over her shoulder. They would have to make a run for better cover before the enemy trucks arrived. There was a cluster of large rocks about 30 yards away that would provide better protection. "On the count of 3, Maria said. 1, 2, 3. They stumbled forward together, David leaning heavily on Maria as she half-carried, half-dragged him toward the rocks. His injured leg made their progress slow and unsteady, and Maria could hear the enemy vehicles getting closer. Bullets started flying again as the enemy soldiers spotted their movement. Just as they reached the rocky outcrop, David's leg gave out completely, and they both tumbled to the ground. Maria quickly checked to make sure his wounds hadn't reopened from the fall, then positioned herself to shield him from incoming fire. "I'm slowing you down," David said breathlessly. "You should leave me here and save yourself." "I already told you we're both getting out of this," Maria replied firmly. "Besides, I've come too far to give up on you now." The enemy vehicles had stopped nearby, and Maria could hear soldiers spreading out to search for them. She knew it was only a matter of time before they were discovered. She checked her rifle and counted her remaining ammunition. She had enough for maybe one brief firefight, but not enough to hold off multiple enemy soldiers for very long. David noticed her checking her weapon, Despite his pain and weakness, he managed to draw his own sidearm. "If they find us, I can still shoot," he said. "My hands work fine." Maria was impressed by his courage, but she hoped it wouldn't come to that. She got on her radio one more time, speaking as quietly as possible while still being audible. "This is Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. Our position has been compromised. We have enemy soldiers searching for us on foot. We need immediate assistance," the response came back quickly. "Rodriguez, hold your position. Air support is en route. E to 5 minutes." 5 minutes felt like an eternity when enemy soldiers were hunting for them. Maria could hear boots crunching on gravel as the searchers moved closer to their hiding spot. She and David pressed themselves as flat as possible against the rocks, barely breathing. An enemy soldier appeared around the edge of their rocky shelter, his weapon raised. For a split second, Maria thought their time was up. But before the soldier could react, the sound of approaching helicopters filled the air. The enemy soldier looked up at the sky, distracted for just a moment. That moment was all Maria needed. She fired a single shot and the enemy soldier fell. Immediately she heard shouts in a foreign language as the other searchers realized their position had been discovered. "Stay down," Maria told David as bullets began hitting the rocks around them. "Help is almost here." The sound of helicopter rotors grew louder, and suddenly the air was filled with the thunder of heavy machine gun fire as the rescue aircraft engaged the enemy forces. Maria had never been so happy to hear the distinctive sound of American military helicopters. Within minutes, the enemy soldiers were either dead or retreating. A rope dropped from one of the helicopters, and 2 rescue medics rappelled down to their position. As they loaded David onto a stretcher, he grabbed Maria's hand. "Thank you," he said simply. "You saved my life." Maria squeezed his hand as the medics prepared to lift him to the helicopter. "Just make sure you take good care of those animals when you become a veterinarian. The world needs people like you." As David was lifted away to safety, Maria felt a strange emptiness. In just a few hours, this young soldier had become more than just another casualty she had treated. Somehow their shared experience had created a connection that felt deeper than anything she had experienced before. 3 weeks passed before Maria received her first letter from David. She was sitting in her small quarters at the base, cleaning her equipment after another long day when Sergeant Thompson knocked on her door. "Rodriguez, you've got mail," he said, handing her a white envelope. "Looks like it's from Germany." Maria recognized the return address immediately. David had been evacuated to a military hospital in Germany for surgery and recovery. She had thought about him many times since that day on the battlefield, wondering how he was doing and whether his leg would heal properly. She opened the letter carefully, and David's handwriting was shaky but legible. "Dear Maria, I hope this letter finds you safe and well. The doctors here say I'm making good progress, though I'll probably walk with a slight limp for the rest of my life. They tell me that's a small price to pay for keeping my leg at all. I owe that to you. I've had a lot of time to think while lying in this hospital bed, and I keep coming back to that day we spent together behind that overturned vehicle. In all the chaos and danger, talking to you was the one thing that kept me calm and hopeful. I know we only knew each other for a few hours, but somehow it felt like I had known you my whole life. I wanted you to know that you're the reason I'm still here, not just because you saved my life, but because you gave me something to fight for. When I was losing consciousness from blood loss, your voice was what brought me back. I hope you don't mind if I write to you again. I'd love to hear about how you're doing and what's happening back at the base. Please stay safe out there. The world needs more people like you. Your friend, David." Maria read the letter 3 times before folding it carefully and placing it in her small jewelry box. She wasn't sure why, but saving David's letter felt important, like preserving something precious. That evening, she sat down to write her response. She found herself sharing more personal details than she had expected. She told David about her childhood in Chicago, about working in her family's small restaurant during high school, and about her decision to join the military to pay for college. She described the other soldiers in her unit and some of the lighter moments they shared between missions. What surprised her most was how easy it was to write to him. The words flowed naturally, as if she were talking to an old friend, rather than someone she had known for only a few hours under extraordinary circumstances. Their correspondence became a regular routine. Every 2 weeks, Maria would receive a letter from David, and she would respond within a few days. Through their letters, she learned about his childhood on the Texas ranch, his close relationship with his younger sister Sophia, and his gentle way with injured animals that had inspired his dream of becoming a veterinarian. David's letters painted vivid pictures of his recovery process. He wrote about the physical therapy sessions that were both painful and hopeful, about the other wounded soldiers he had befriended in the hospital, and about his growing determination to walk normally again. His optimism and humor shone through even when he described the most difficult parts of his recovery. "The physical therapist here is a tough German woman named Ingrid," David wrote in one letter. "She makes drill sergeants look like kindergarten teachers. Yesterday she made me walk up and down stairs for an hour straight. My leg was screaming, but I kept thinking about what you said about not giving up on people. I figured if you didn't give up on me when I was bleeding out in Afghanistan, I couldn't give up on myself in a comfortable hospital in Germany." Maria found herself looking forward to David's letters more than anything else in her routine. During particularly difficult days when she had lost soldiers she couldn't save, or when the fighting seemed endless, his letters reminded her that her efforts made a real difference in people's lives. In her own letters, Maria began opening up about the challenges of being one of the few women in combat roles. She wrote about the extra pressure she felt to prove herself capable, and the loneliness that sometimes came with being different from most of her fellow soldiers. David's responses were always supportive and understanding, never dismissive of her experiences. "I've seen you under the worst possible circumstances," David wrote in response to one of her more vulnerable letters. "You didn't just prove you were capable that day, you proved you were exceptional. Any soldier would be lucky to serve alongside you, and anyone who thinks otherwise is an idiot." As months passed, their letters became longer and more frequent. They began sharing their hopes and fears for life after military service. David wrote about his acceptance to veterinary school and his plans to specialize in large animal medicine. Maria described her growing interest in trauma medicine and her dream of working in a hospital emergency room where she could use the skills she had learned in the military to help civilian patients. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to meet you under normal circumstances," David wrote in one letter. "Like at a coffee shop or a bookstore, instead of behind an overturned vehicle while people are shooting at us. Do you think we would have gotten along as well if we had met at a college party or something ordinary like that?" Maria had wondered the same thing many times. Their connection had been forged in extreme circumstances, and she sometimes questioned whether it would translate to normal life. But the more they corresponded, the more she believed that their friendship was based on more than just shared trauma. One day, Maria received a letter that was different from the others. David's handwriting was excited, and he had written in larger letters than usual. "Maria, great news. The doctors are releasing me next month. I'll be flying back to the United States for final evaluation and discharge processing. I know this might sound crazy, but I was wondering if there's any chance you might be coming back to the States for leave or rotation anytime soon. I would love to meet you again under better circumstances, maybe somewhere with actual food and no one shooting at us. I understand if military schedules don't work out, or if you think it's too weird to meet up with someone you only knew for a few hours in a war zone. But I had to ask, because the idea of seeing you again is the thing I'm most looking forward to about coming home. Let me know what you think, and regardless of whether we can meet up, please know that knowing you has changed my life in ways I'm still figuring out." Maria stared at the letter for a long time, her heart racing. The idea of seeing David again both excited and terrified her. She had built up an image of him in her mind based on their letters and that intense day they had shared. What if reality didn't match up? What if their connection only existed in the extraordinary circumstances of war? But as she thought about all the letters they had exchanged, all the personal details they had shared, and all the ways he had supported her through difficult times from thousands of miles away, she realized that her feelings for David had grown far beyond simple friendship. She was falling in love with a man she had known for only a few hours in person. Maria's hands trembled slightly as she wrote her response to David's letter. She had spent 3 days thinking about his invitation to meet when he returned to the United States. After much consideration, she had decided to request emergency leave to coincide with his return. "Dear David," she wrote, "I would love to see you again. I've put in for a 2-week leave, and if it gets approved, I should be back in the States around the same time as you. We could meet somewhere neutral, maybe Dallas, since it's not too far from your family's ranch. I have to admit I'm nervous about seeing you again, but I can't stop thinking about the possibility." 2 months later, Maria found herself standing in the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, scanning the crowd for a face she had seen only briefly under the worst possible circumstances. She wore a simple blue dress and had let her hair down for the first time in months. Her heart pounded as she waited near the baggage claim area where they had agreed to meet. Then she saw him. David was walking slowly with a slight limp, just as he had mentioned in his letters. But he was unmistakably the same person who had talked with her for hours behind that overturned vehicle. He was taller than she remembered, with kind brown eyes that lit up the moment he spotted her. For a moment, they just stood there looking at each other, both uncertain how to bridge the gap between their wartime experience and this peaceful airport setting. Then David smiled, the same determined smile he had given her when he insisted he could still fight despite his injuries, and walked over to her. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez," he said formally, then grinned. "Though I suppose it's okay to call you Maria now." "It's good to see you standing up, Corporal Martinez," Maria replied, matching his playful tone. "You look much better than the last time I saw you." They hugged awkwardly at first, then more warmly as they both relaxed. Maria was surprised by how natural it felt to be near him again, despite the completely different circumstances. "I have to say," David said as they walked toward the airport exit, "you look amazing in civilian clothes. Much prettier than military fatigues, though you looked pretty good in those too." Maria laughed. "Well, you clean up pretty well yourself, and you're walking much better than I expected." David gestured to his leg. "Physical therapy worked wonders. I still can't run marathons, but I can walk normally most of the time. The doctor said the shrapnel could have been much worse if someone hadn't treated the wound so quickly in the field." He looked at her meaningfully. "I owe you my ability to walk." They spent the afternoon walking around downtown Dallas, visiting museums and talking constantly. Maria was amazed by how easily their conversation flowed. It was like continuing a discussion they had started months ago in their letters, rather than meeting someone for essentially the first time. David told her about his final weeks in the German hospital and his excitement about starting veterinary school in the fall. Maria shared stories about her remaining months in Afghanistan and her own plans for using her GI benefits to complete her nursing degree. "You know," David said as they sat in a small cafe, "I was worried that our connection was just because of the extreme situation we were in. Like maybe we only got along because we thought we might die at any moment." "I wondered about that too," Maria admitted. "But being here with you now, it feels just as natural as it did in our letters. Maybe even more so." David reached across the table and took her hand. "Maria, I need to tell you something. Over the past year, through all our letters and thinking about you, I've realized that what I feel for you is more than just gratitude or friendship." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She had hoped he might feel the same way she did, but hearing him say it out loud was both thrilling and terrifying. "I feel the same way," she said softly. "I've been afraid to say it because our situation has been so unusual, but I think I'm in love with you, David." David's face broke into a huge smile. "Really?" "Because I am definitely in love with you. I have been for months, probably since that second letter you sent me." They spent the next week together and every day confirmed what they had both suspected. Their connection was real and deep, based not just on shared trauma but on genuine compatibility and affection. They discovered they had similar values, shared senses of humor, and complementary strengths. David took Maria to his family's ranch, where she met his parents and his sister Sophia. The Martinez family welcomed her warmly, treating her like a hero for saving David's life and like a beloved family member for making him so happy. "David hasn't stopped talking about you since he got home," Sophia told Maria privately. "I was starting to think you might be too good to be true, but now I see why he's so smitten." Maria felt completely at home on the ranch. She helped David's father with the cattle and learned to ride horses, something she had never had the opportunity to do growing up in Chicago. David's mother taught her family recipes and shared stories about David's childhood that made Maria fall in love with him even more. He was always bringing home injured animals, his mother explained as they prepared dinner together. "Birds with broken wings, stray cats, even a baby armadillo once. I should have known he'd end up with someone who saves lives for a living." On their last evening together before Maria had to return to duty, David took her to a quiet spot on the ranch where they could see the stars clearly. They sat on a blanket, talking about their future plans and how they might make a relationship work despite the challenges of military life and distance. "I know this is complicated," David said, holding her close. "You still have 6 months left on your deployment, and then I'll be in veterinary school while you're finishing your nursing degree. We'll be apart more than we're together for the next few years." "I know," Maria replied, "but I also know that what we have is worth fighting for. We've already proven we can maintain a connection across thousands of miles in completely different circumstances." David turned to face her directly. "Maria Rodriguez, I love you. I want to build a life with you, even if it means being patient and creative about how we make it work. Will you be my girlfriend? Will you take a chance on this crazy relationship that started in a war zone?" Maria kissed him softly. "Yes, David Martinez. I will absolutely take that chance. We survived a battlefield together. I think we can handle anything life throws at us." As they lay on the blanket looking up at the Texas stars, both Maria and David felt a sense of peace and certainty about their future together. They had found love in the most unlikely place, and they were determined to nurture it into something lasting and beautiful. The next morning, as Maria prepared to fly back to Afghanistan to complete her deployment, she knew that this time the separation would be different. She wasn't just leaving behind a pen pal or a friend. She was leaving behind the man she planned to spend the rest of her life with. Returning to Afghanistan after her time with David was harder than Maria had expected. The base looked the same. Her fellow soldiers welcomed her back warmly and her duties continued as before. But everything felt different now. She had something precious waiting for her back home, and that knowledge both motivated her and made her more cautious about taking unnecessary risks. David had returned to Texas to prepare for veterinary school, and their relationship now had to survive not just distance, but also vastly different daily experiences. While Maria dealt with the ongoing dangers and stresses of military deployment, David was adjusting to student life and the challenges of intensive academic coursework. Their communication evolved beyond letters to include emails, video calls when internet connections allowed, and care packages sent across continents. Despite the time zone differences and unpredictable schedules, they managed to maintain regular contact and continued growing closer. "I got your package yesterday," Maria wrote in an email. "The homemade cookies from your mother were amazing, though I had to fight off half my unit to keep them. Everyone here knows about my veterinarian boyfriend in Texas now. Sergeant Thompson says you must be special if I'm willing to share my mother's chocolate chip cookie recipe with your mom." David's emails were filled with details about his studies and updates on his recovery. His leg had healed well enough for him to keep up with the physical demands of veterinary school, though he still experienced some pain during long days. He wrote about learning to deliver calves, performing surgery on injured horses, and his growing excitement about his future career. "Today we practiced emergency surgery procedures," David wrote. "I kept thinking about how you saved my life with quick medical decisions under pressure. It made me want to be the kind of veterinarian who can stay calm and effective when animals are in crisis. You're still inspiring me to be better, even from thousands of miles away." The months passed slowly, but their relationship continued to deepen. They shared their daily experiences, supported each other through difficult times, and made plans for their future together. Maria's military service was scheduled to end just as David would be finishing his second year of veterinary school. "I've been thinking about where I want to apply for nursing jobs when I get out," Maria wrote in one email. "There are several good hospitals near your veterinary school. I know it might seem like I'm following you around, but I want us to be in the same place. We've done the long-distance thing long enough." David's response came quickly. "Are you kidding? I would be thrilled to have you nearby. I've been hoping you'd want to move here, but I didn't want to pressure you. There's a level 1 trauma center about 30 minutes from my school that would be perfect for someone with your experience." Their plans were interrupted when Maria's deployment was extended by 3 months due to ongoing military operations. The news was devastating for both of them, as they had been counting down the days until her return to the United States. "I'm so sorry," Maria said during a scratchy video call. "I know this messes up all our timing. You'll be starting your 3rd year and I'll still be stuck here." David's face was understanding but disappointed. "Hey, we've made it this far. 3 more months is nothing compared to what we've already been through. Besides, this gives me more time to find us a perfect place to live when you get back." The extension turned out to be a blessing in disguise. During those additional 3 months, Maria was promoted to Sergeant First Class in recognition of her outstanding service and leadership. The promotion came with a commendation for the day she had saved David's life, along with several other instances where she had gone above and beyond to help her fellow soldiers. More importantly, the extra time allowed Maria to save additional money and complete some college courses online, putting her ahead in her nursing program. David used the time to excel in his studies and secure a part-time job at a local veterinary clinic, gaining valuable hands-on experience. When Maria's deployment finally ended, David was waiting for her at the airport in San Antonio with a sign that read, "Welcome home, my hero." The reunion was everything they had dreamed about during their long separation. This time there was no awkwardness or uncertainty. They fell into each other's arms like they had never been apart. "You look older," Maria observed, studying David's face. "More mature. Veterinary school has been good for you." "You look stronger," David replied, more confident. "I think leadership suits you." They drove to a small apartment David had rented near his veterinary school. It was simple but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms so Maria could have space for studying when she started her nursing program. "I know we haven't talked about living together officially," David said as he showed her around, "but I was hoping, if you want to—" Maria kissed him to stop his nervous rambling. "David Martinez, I have been waiting for almost 2 years to wake up next to you every morning. Yes, I want to live with you." Adjusting to civilian life together had its challenges. Maria experienced some difficulty transitioning from military structure to academic life, and David had to get used to sharing his space and routines with another person. But their communication skills, developed through years of long-distance relationship, served them well. Maria enrolled in an accelerated nursing program designed for military veterans. While continuing to support David through his final years of veterinary school, she found work as a medical technician at the local trauma center, gaining valuable experience while completing her degree. Their life together was busy but happy. They studied together at the kitchen table, with Maria working on anatomy and physiology, while David studied animal diseases and surgical procedures. They discovered they made an excellent team, helping each other through difficult coursework and celebrating each other's successes. "I love watching you with patients," David told Maria after visiting her at the hospital. "You have the same calm confidence you showed that day in Afghanistan. You're exactly where you're supposed to be." Maria felt the same way about David's work with animals. She often visited him at the veterinary clinic where he worked part-time, amazed by his gentle touch with frightened animals and his dedication to healing. "Remember when you told me you wanted to take care of animals when you became a veterinarian?" she said one evening as they watched David bottle feed an orphaned lamb. "You're already doing it. You have a gift for this." As David's graduation from veterinary school approached, they began making more concrete plans for their future. David had been offered a position at a large animal practice, specializing in ranch and farm animals, while Maria was completing her nursing degree with top honors and had multiple job offers from local hospitals. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their apartment watching the sunset, David took Maria's hand and looked serious. "Maria, we need to talk about something important," he said. Maria's heart skipped a beat, hoping this was the conversation she had been quietly hoping for. Maria's heart raced as David took her hand on the porch that evening. After everything they had been through together, she hoped this moment was leading where she thought it might be. "Maria," David began, his voice steady but emotional. "4 years ago, you saved my life on a battlefield in Afghanistan. But you did more than that. You saved my faith in what life could be. You showed me what real courage looks like, and you taught me that love can grow in the most impossible circumstances." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Maria gasped, covering her mouth with her free hand. "I know our love story started in a war zone, but I want the rest of it to be filled with peace and happiness," David continued, getting down on one knee. "Maria Rodriguez, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and being grateful every single day that you were brave enough to run across that battlefield to save a stranger?" Through tears of joy, Maria said yes before David had even finished asking. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, a beautiful, simple solitaire that caught the light from the setting sun, she pulled him up and kissed him deeply. "I love you so much, David," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, I want to marry you." I want to build a life with the man who kept me company during the scariest hours of my life, and then spent 4 years proving that what we found was real. Their engagement was celebrated by both families, though David's family had to admit they had been expecting it for months. His sister Sophia confessed that David had asked for their grandmother's ring 6 months earlier, but had been waiting for the perfect moment. He wanted to wait until you both had finished school and started your careers, Sophia explained. He said you deserved to be proposed to as the successful, accomplished woman you are, not just as his girlfriend. Maria was touched by David's thoughtfulness. He had always respected her independence and ambitions, supporting her goals rather than trying to rush her into different priorities. Planning their wedding while finishing their respective educational programs was challenging but exciting. They decided on a small ceremony at David's family ranch, with their closest family and friends in attendance. Many of Maria's former military colleagues planned to attend, including Sergeant Thompson, who had become like a big brother to her over the years. You know, Thompson said during his visit to help with wedding planning, I always wondered if that Martinez kid would track you down someday. The way you talked about him after that rescue, I could tell something special had happened out there. Maria laughed. Was I that obvious? Let's just say you kept his first letter a little too long before mentioning it to anyone, Thompson teased. And you got a little too excited every time mail arrived from Germany. 3 months before their wedding, both Maria and David graduated from their respective programs. Maria earned her nursing degree with highest honors and immediately accepted a position in the trauma surgery unit at a major hospital. David passed his veterinary boards and started working full-time at the large animal practice that had courted him throughout his final year of school. Their wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, with Texas wildflowers blooming across the ranch. Maria wore her grandmother's wedding dress, altered to fit her perfectly, while David wore his military dress uniform in honor of their shared service. The ceremony was simple, but deeply meaningful. David's childhood pastor officiated, and they wrote their own vows that brought tears to every guest's eyes. Maria, David said, looking directly into her eyes as he spoke, you ran toward danger to save my life, and then you taught me what it means to run toward love. You are my hero, my best friend, and the strongest person I know. I promise to support your dreams, celebrate your successes, and stand beside you through every challenge life brings us. Maria's vows were equally heartfelt. David, you showed me that courage isn't just about facing bullets or saving lives in emergencies. Real courage is opening your heart to love someone completely, even when circumstances seem impossible. You waited for me, believed in us, and proved that some connections are strong enough to survive anything. I promise to love you with the same determination I showed on that battlefield. Completely, fearlessly, and forever. As they exchanged rings, Maria thought about the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. What had started as a split-second decision to save a wounded soldier had become the foundation of the most important relationship in her life. Their reception was filled with stories from their families and friends about the long path that had led to this day. Several of Maria's military colleagues shared tales of her bravery and dedication, while David's veterinary school friends talked about his constant references to his amazing girlfriend who served in Afghanistan. The highlight of the reception was a surprise video message from some of the German hospital staff who had cared for David during his recovery. They had heard about his wedding and wanted to congratulate the couple whose love story had inspired everyone who knew them. We remember David talking about the female medic who saved his life, said Ingrid, the tough physical therapist David had written about in his letters. He said she was the most courageous person he had ever met, and that someday he was going to marry her. We are so happy to see that dreams can come true. After their honeymoon, a peaceful week at a cabin in the Colorado mountains where they hiked, fished, and simply enjoyed being together without any pressure or schedules, Maria and David settled into married life with the same determination they had brought to their long-distance relationship. They bought a small house halfway between the hospital, where Maria worked, and the veterinary practice where David treated horses and cattle. Their home became a gathering place for friends and family, filled with the warmth and hospitality they had both learned from their parents. 5 years after their wedding, as they sat on their back porch watching David work with an injured horse in their pasture, Maria reflected on the unexpected path their lives had taken. Do you ever think about that day in Afghanistan? She asked David as he walked back to the house, his work with the horse complete. Every day, David replied, sitting beside her and taking her hand. Not the scary parts, though. I think about how lucky I am that you were the medic who heard me calling for help. I think about how you refused to leave me behind and how that decision changed both our lives forever. Maria smiled, watching the horse David had just treated graze peacefully in their pasture. I used to think that day was about me saving you, she said. But I think we saved each other. You gave me someone to fight for, someone to come home to. You turned the worst day of my deployment into the beginning of the best part of my life. David kissed her hand, his eyes full of love and gratitude. Here's to love that starts with courage and grows into everything else we could ever want. As the sun set over their Texas home, surrounded by the animals they cared for and the life they had built together, Maria and David knew that their love story, which had begun amid pain and bloodshed, had become something beautiful, lasting and filled with hope for the future.